Okay, guys, so we're putting together our Ultimate 11, and we've come up with 2 players, and you two have got to decide which of these 2 players makes it to the Ultimate 11. The 2 players' names are, check notes, Sachin Tendulkar and Virat Kohli.
I've heard of
Oh
them.
my goodness me.
This should be easy.
Friends of the show.
Friends of the show.
So I set you this task last night, so I imagine you've both gone through quite rigorous research methods. So Jarrod, just gives a little idea as a historian, a statistician, a lover of the game. You know, when I set you the task, you've got to choose one of Tendulkar or Kohli. How did you go about things to try and come up with your answer? I don't want the answer. Just give a flavour of what you did.
I have about a 25-line algorithmic system that I go through to have a look at how I rate players of different eras, to be fair to players from eras. And I'm sure Bumble does the exact same thing.
He has a what?
I'll take you through the spreadsheets later, Bumble.
Right. Got a cream for that. Bumble, how did you go about, this is a big question, a big pondering question I've set you. How did you go about things?
I'm massive on research.
That's why we're here together.
Yeah, if I get anything thrown at me like that, either or, you've got to do research. So I was down here in London last night, so I hot-footed straight to a restaurant, and the owner of the restaurant was from Nepal, and all his staff were from India, and they knew cricket, and so I set them the task. Whilst I was having a very, very nice lamb jalfrezi.
So you cheated?
No, I didn't. I brought colleagues in, colleagues who I'd just met, and I set them the task. I said, I'll go away, I'll just finish my jalfrezi, you've got 15 minutes. And I want the definitive from you. There might have been seven people, all mad keen on cricket.
Did they know who you were?
They did, and had my picture taken and so on. And they came back with the answer. And it was to a man. It's not a some for, some against.
Really?
Every one of them.
There was a unanimous, you said to them, I need a unanimous decision?
No, they came back and they all said, right, who are you going? I'm going, I think this is a split decision, and as chairman, I've got a casting vote. Every one of them.
Were they all of the same age group?
No.
Really?
No, the owner was a mature gentleman. There was a chap who had played cricket and retired, and 2 or 3 younger staff.
Can you guess who the people who worked at the restaurant Bumble went to last night? Who they?
If it's unanimous, I think it has to be Sachin.
He's completely wrong.
Really?
Utterly wrong.
They all went Virat.
All staggered. I was absolutely staggered. And they gave on one hand, Sachin, what did Daddy do, a technician and so on. But Virat Kohli changed the game. He's dynamite. And I was staggered. I thought they'll go Sachin. They'll all go Sachin. And so I've now got to make a decision, which has thrown me.
Yeah.
That's the staff from the restaurant. I then research, get on social media.
Got the algorithm out?
I wouldn't know how to spell it. So social media, and I threw it out on social media. I have a task tomorrow. This is my task, either or. You can only have one.
And was it unanimous?
95% Sachin.
Oh, really?
95% Sachin.
Well, that just shows it's a good topic for debate.
And telling me, and criticising me, that even asking the question. Why are you asking this question? It's ridiculous. There's only one answer. And the one thing that kept coming up, Sachin would leave his ego at home. Ooh. No, I think the other guy's quite a personable chap. Virat Kohli.
I mean, they're different kinds of people, aren't they? Sachin is from that era of India, is the kind of that kind of person, and Virat Kohli is a modern style of India. Mm-hmm. So they are very, very different from that perspective. So I understand that, but yeah, I don't. The ego helps sometimes, right? You're facing Mitchell Johnson. You want a little bit of ego.
I have no problem with that, and having dealt with players and seeing what makes a player. They're not all the same. They're all different. Kevin Peterson is the best player I've seen play for England. I've seen some great players: Geoffrey Boycott, Graham Gooch, David Gower, and but Kevin Peterson got me on the edge of the seat. Now I don't know Kevin Peterson, but I'd guess that he's got a bit of an ego, which drives
I think that's
him.
safe.
Which is that's his makeup.
Yeah.
That's him. That's what I am. His DNA.
So, would you say it was did you have to go and check the algorithm, or did you pretty much know the answer?
Well, this is the thing. I don't think you're a big enough nerd on this sort of stuff. Because you need to say...
First time that's ever been said.
Yeah, only.
I'm sure there's a compliment there somewhere.
Because is this Test cricket or is this all format cricket?
Test cricket.
If it's Test cricket, then it's not even close. I think, you both know I'm writing a book on the greatest batters of all time. Obviously, Bradman is going to be number one. It's going to be very hard for him not to be number one. The only player I could make a case for being number one outside of Bradman is Sachin Tendulkar.
And why is that?
It's because of the longevity of the greatness. So Jack Hobbs and Sachin Tendulkar are probably going to be 2 and 3 on my list. And it's because they both have 20 years of being great. So you think about if you want to find another player that can be better than them. Let's say Sachin is a 9.7, right? And Lara is a 9.9. If Sachin has 6 more years of giving you greatness, you're always going to take the person who gives you the extra amount of time. And that's the thing with Sachin is to think about him as a teenager being good enough to play Test cricket and as a 19-year-old being able to dominate attacks and still in his late 30s being able to do that same thing. There's only really a couple of batters who have ever done anything like that before. And what I'm looking for specifically is how many years were you great? Because if I'm India, for two generations, they don't have to find another great player. Virat Kohli has a period of about 7 or 8 years that I think are comparable with anything Sachin did. But he wasn't like that when he was a younger player. And then he had a big drop off later on in his Test career. Which is fine. It was a tougher era for batting and everything. But Sachin played in the 90s, which was a pretty tough era for batting, and was incredible in the 90s. So Sachin's record is really interesting because in the 90s, you could argue he might have had one of the greatest decades any player has ever had. And in the 2000s, he probably just chipped the ball around for him. But that was an easier era, and he made a lot of runs in the 2000s. But it's really the 90s where he was the great player that he was. But you get 2 decades of a player. If you get 2 decades of a great player, I don't know how you argue unless you're saying the other person is so much better. I think me and Bumble, and this is a different argument for another day, I think me and Bumble would both say that Brian Lara at his peak was probably better than Sachin, right? But over the entirety of their careers, Sachin was great almost every time he went out to play. And I just think, as good as Virat Kohli is, and Virat Kohli, when the Fab Four came up, do you remember when we all first started talking about the Fab Four, I was like, Virat's my guy. That's the guy I think is going to be the greatest. And he hasn't, right? Steve Smith's probably outbatted him in Test cricket, and Joe Root and Virat are close, and Kane Williamson's not far behind. But Kohli was always my guy, partly because of that ego. I love the way he takes the game on. I love the way that he makes everything about, you have to go through me. Him and Ricky Ponting are guys that you have to go through, right? You can't go around them. You've got one choice, and I love that. Sachin was very different. Sachin was a technician. There's that great story that Brett Lee talks about. You bowled to Sachin Tendulkar, 6 balls on the top of off stump, and he'll hit every one of them to mid-off or mid-on. Exactly where you're supposed to hit it. You bowl 6 balls at the top of off stump to Brian Lara, and you have no idea where these balls are going to end up, right? Sachin made the right decisions over and over and over again, and he deserves incredible respect for that. I would prefer to watch Virat Kohli play, but I think Sachin was the better Test batter.
What about you, Bumble?
He's Test cricket, Sachin. The other guy is incredible, Virat Kohli. Dangerous and would take the game away. An exciting player. And going back to what Jarrod said, that if I had a choice in a Test match of Sachin Tendulkar or Brian Lara, I would have Lara. I thought he could hit the ball in places that have never been invented quite naturally. Do it all very naturally. And again, a different animal, Brian Lara too. Brian could get a little bit tetchy, and I never saw that with Sachin Tendulkar. And he was on an even keel all the time. Tendulkar didn't really change. And so for Test match cricket, between him and Virat Kohli, two fabulous players, it's not really an argument. Sachin.
Who would you rather watch?
Virat Kohli.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sublime. Sachin Tendulkar. You know, all's right with the world. But I like a bit of rock and roll.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about it. Oh, I mentioned Vivian Richards. I mentioned Viv. I mean, I played against Viv a lot, and I've got to know him, and you know, he's a bit of a mate.
Friend of the show.
He's a mate. I just used to watch him when we played against him. When he came into bat, and I used to stand at wherever I used to think, if only I could just walk like that. I just want to walk like that. He had a presence as soon as he appeared, just a presence on the field, and which he brought through. And when he was at second slip, he had some great lines. You know, the chip away. It's not sledging. I never got sledged in my life ever. But he had some great lines. When he was playing at Surrey, and they had Colin Dredge at one end, his nickname was the Demon of Froome. Colin Dredge had an awkward action. He wasn't very quick, but tried. And you'd be batting and doing the spectre of Joel Garner coming on at the other end, and Viv would be at second slip. And he'd shout to Colin Dredge, he said, "He's on the basement, take him up to the top floor." So ball him a bouncer is what he was meaning. I used to chuckle. He had some really good lines.
There is, you may mention the fact that they played at different times, okay, which is kind of obvious, but also very important, because Sachin Tendulkar almost took India through to professionalism. You know, when he started playing in, 1990? 1980?
Yeah, it was before that, wasn't it? He played in the 80s, yeah.
Well, no, sorry, it's for India. So
I think his first test was in the 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it could have been, but it wasn't too far before.
Yeah. It was right at the end of the 80s.
It was right at the end of the 80s, and then he obviously played for 20-year career, predominantly Test matches and, of course, ODIs, but T20s. He played one international T20. Much is made of him driving around Mumbai at 3 a.m. It was the only time he could, get away from the crowds.
It's the only time anyone can drive from Mumbai.
Well, that's also true. But Kohli has lived in a 365 days a year world, right? Where every single thing he does is on social media, it's on TV. He does tests, ODIs, T20s. He's done IPL. He's done all the fame. He's got the famous girlfriend. I mean, he's basically lived his life
out loud
in a way that Sachin kind of got a little bit of a break at times. So, do you not have to factor that into the equation as well? Let's move it on as well. Let's say, okay, so you've both agreed Sachin is your Test cricketer. It's Sachin over Kohli, Test only. What about all format? Does that make things a little bit? Does that bring it in a little narrower? Does it even change your mind?
I think Sachin's still probably one of the greatest ODI players of all time, but Virat might be slightly ahead of him. I'd have to go through the numbers for hours to be able to come up with an accurate description there. But I think that's probably fairly accurate when you go through it from that perspective.
We're talking about two of the greatest players that there's ever been. Yeah. And we're trying to dissect as to what's what. And sort of T20 and one-day internationals, you could easily go for Kohli. This 365 and can't do anything, come and live in London, nobody know. Just come and live in London.
Well, he does, doesn't he?
No, it's
don't
Kohli.
tell people.
Yeah.
Friend of the show.
Does Virat Kohli live in London?
He spends his fair amount of
time. A little bit
of
time here.
Well, he come up to Manchester if he wants.
I'm sure he
could. Do you know, there's a great story. The American sports writer Wright Thompson followed Virat Kohli for a while, and they went to a watch opening together. And it was like, watches. I don't know. I don't really understand these things. But yeah, he went to some sort of promotional thing in a shopping centre, and in the shopping centre was like I assume a very expensive watch brand who had paid Virat Kohli to come to their shop. And Wright Thompson suddenly looked out and realised that there was no escape from the store. People were the whole shopping centre was around the front of this watch trying to get into Virat Kohli. And Wright Thompson started to have a panic attack. He's thinking this might be the last thing I ever do. Like, I'm just going to be stuck in this shop. And then he looks over and Virat Kohli is chuckling. He's like, this is just a normal day.
Yeah.
Like, so it does become normal. I would say that Virat has probably I don't think I've ever come across a professional athlete who's maxed out their numbers of hours a day. He does everything, right? He's I don't know him personally, but I have a lot of friends in common. He's a very doting father, very doting husband. He's involved with every advertising thing. You know, when I was briefly involved with RCB, the running joke was he was the busiest man in the world. That's what they used to call him, the busiest man in the world. He's always doing things. Whereas I think Sachin was a little bit better at probably finding time just for himself. Just getting in his own thing. But that's who Virat Kohli is. I think Virat Kohli loves being the busiest man in the world. I think he loves being involved with everything.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.